snowward bound. It was the dead of winter in the Northwest, and I was headed from central Oregon north into Washington. About 100 miles into my trip, I hit the first snowstorm of the season, and it was a beaut. After tolerating inching traffic on fast icing roads for about 45 minutes, I decided I'd consciously try to change circumstances and get myself out of that mess. I visualized a sea of probabilities and chose one where I broke free of the traffic and sailed on my way, feeling great happiness at my good fortune. It wasn't to be. It took me another 40 minutes to travel a couple of miles amidst jackknifed trucks and scores of stalled and stuck cars. Because I needed to make a pit stop, I very cautiously pulled off the next exit, slipping and sliding my way through intersections as the snowflakes deepened into a near blizzard. About a mile up the road, my car refused to grab the ice enough to give me traction, and I found the only direction I could go was in reverse. I backed into a side street, but because of the angle of my car, I was forced to return up the road I just traveled. By now I was really worried. Vehicles were all over the place, in ditches, wrecked fender to wrecked fender, frozen in the middle of traffic lanes. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon and already dark as midnight. About the time I realized I could go no further, a motel vacancy flashed its sign, "Welcome," and I skidded into piled snow while looking for its entrance. My car was going nowhere for sure this time, so I grabbed my overnight bag and tramped to the motel's office. As I lifted my eyes into the blowing wind, I caught a glimpse of a restaurant across the street. After I checked in and got settled in my room, I turned on the news and quickly came to realize how lucky I was. Unbeknownst to me, the traffic I'd hit on the freeway was the start of a 100-mile inching line that came to a complete stop shortly after I exited. And there the travelers sat, some for up to 7 hours. Not only that, the ones who were fortunate enough to get off the freeway before it slid to a halt flooded the hotels and motels in the area, and available rooms disappeared by 4 o'clock that afternoon. My no-star motel room was looking better and better as the televised news progressed, and I didn't even mind the soaked shoes and socks as I plowed through snowbanks to the nearby restaurant later that night. I'd experimented with probability changes with some successes in the past, and before I listened to the news unfold, I wonder why I hadn't been able to impact the situation. As the hours progressed and more horror stories hit the airwaves, I started chuckling to myself. I had impacted probabilities. I'd done it. Not my initial desire, but nonetheless, I'd done all right. It's true, I didn't sail on my way as I'd wanted to, but that was basically the only downside to my predicament. And what a sea of probabilities loaded with disasters I'd navigated all the way to a warm, dry, non-hungry evening. Here's food for thought. Why did I need to find a bathroom moments before the freeway literally came to a standstill? Why did my car get into a position where it could only go back the way I'd come, which just so happened to have a motel on my side of the street, right when I knew I could go no further? Why was a room still available when the motel clerk told me of the growing shortage and the TV later confirmed it? Why was the motel next to a restaurant when it would have been impossible to walk even a block in search of one? Maybe my visualized feelings of good fortune did indeed help my selection of probabilities. Since I create my own reality, I assume that to be a correct assessment. Lost objects aren't. I was in a hotel room in Minneapolis when I dropped a small, inexpensive earring. I hurriedly searched the floor, but due to time pressures, I gave up and left for my appointment. Then I forgot about the earring for the rest of my several days' stay. When I returned home, I decided to leave its mate in my jewelry holder and see what might happen. The jewelry holder traveled with me on several trips over the next 2 months, as did the lone earring stuffed into a small compartment. Then one day I opened the compartment, and lo and behold, there sat both earrings. Stan tells a similar story. A solid gold cufflink that had been lost for over 25 years reappeared in his jewelry case next to its mate, which Stan hadn't discarded because of its sentimental value. The committee said we simply changed probabilities and rematerialized the objects. Lost objects are. Stan and I were driving home to Oregon from a meeting in California one sunny day. Because the meeting was the last item on our business agenda and we headed home immediately thereafter, we stopped at a fast food place to change into casual clothes. I entered the end stall in the ladies' room, an oversized box designed for wheelchair access, and proceeded to undress. The first thing I did was to remove my earrings and place them on the floor at my feet. Then I dropped my clothes on top of the earrings. After I'd redressed and started packing my carry-all bag with my discarded clothes, I discovered, to my chagrin, that one of my rather large earrings was missing. I was the only one in the restroom, so I diligently searched not only my stall, but the floors of the other two. I even stripped, shook out my clothes, redressed, and then grabbed the clothes in the carry-all and waved them around. No earring was to be found. This is impossible, I thought. That earring couldn't simply have disappeared into thin air. Could it? Yes, said the committee later. It could, and did, through a change in probabilities. They suggested I play with this one, meaning I could alter probabilities and rematerialize it if I tried. I did for a day or two and then decided it wasn't worth the effort. But I still carry the mate to the lost earring in my purse, and someday I expect to open it, and there will be 2 shiny gold objects side by side. When it's no longer an option. One time I asked the committee why a certain event did not occur, and they said, because you decided it was no longer an option. Is it that simple to change probabilities? Just decide that what seems the most obvious direction is no longer an option? We all establish psychic boundaries around certain areas of our lives that represent the demarcation line between what we will and what we will not accept. While the line may undulate around the periphery of our off-limits area, meaning sometimes we allow ourselves to step beyond our borders, it eventually becomes firm and obvious. My sister Pam, for instance, will allow herself to go only so far with a serious illness, and then she calls it quits. One time she was told it had become necessary for her to carry a personal oxygen supply for the rest of her life. Within a week, she was completely free of the illness. I asked her what happened, and she replied, I screamed to myself in essence, no, this is not an option. Another time, she was told she had a heart condition that would permanently disable her. She screamed and it went away. Both times she hit the electric wire of her off-limit psychic field and ended the problematic situation by not accepting it any longer. We all do the same thing to varying degrees and drama. Some will push themselves to the brink of bankruptcy and then cry in so many words, this is not an option. Some will face discrimination only so long and then cry, this is not an option. Yet in other areas of their lives, they're wide open to pain and sadness because they have no established point of retraction. In my case, moderate to serious ill health is not an option. I may give myself a headache or a drippy nose every once in a while, but that's about all. I never entertain the idea of illness. I don't fight it off. It just never occurs to me that sickness is a possibility. So strong is my belief in my psychic boundary that when I cancelled my health insurance, it was without a qualm. It seemed silly, when I thought about it, for me to continue to validate a possibility that no longer existed as an option in my life. I don't take vitamins, I don't monitor my cholesterol level, I don't check for breast cancer or schedule pap tests. I don't get preventive inoculations or annual health checkups. I assume I'm in menopause, but I'll never take hormones or related medication. I also don't lock my car or home, and I don't carry a rape whistle or own a handgun. I guess you could say I feel I live in a safe universe, and that the only demons that could possibly destroy me from within my body or outside in my environment are my own thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs. Can these psychic boundaries be consciously initiated? Sure, they're built of beliefs, just as all other areas in life are, and therefore can be cultivated by desire. When we change our minds or drop a previously held belief, what happens in universal terms? We close down one probability, maybe the most prevalent at the moment, and surround ourselves with others. We halt the forward movement of one probability and sidestep into a field of new possibility. When we stop buying into the idea that a past, present, or possible future event is unchangeable, immovable, rock solid, a given, then we're free to experience other options. Miraculous time. Why is it so important whether an event is formed in the present, was formed in the past, or will be formed in the future? Because our ability to drastically change our lives depends on our understanding the structure behind the creation of events, and simultaneous time is the obvious key to that understanding. By knowing what we're dealing with, we can use it to great advantage. People talk of miracles as though they're not only outside themselves, but larger than life, and yet every moment of their existence they are involved in an intricate dance with the universe that is far more miraculous than a simple parting of the sea. As Seth tells us over and over, when we come to understand how time functions, we will eventually be able to merge our inner comprehension with our outer perceptions, and then we can form our world on a conscious basis. Can we handle the miracle of a world at peace and value fulfillment for all, if that's what we chose to consciously manifest? That's a tough question. I mean, then we'd have to believe in ourselves instead of an outside source of power. We'd have to believe the world is filled with good intent instead of evil, and we'd have to believe we are the creators of every inch of our lives. But that presents a problem. Who on earth could we blame if something went wrong? Chapter 4. You are in physical existence to learn and understand that your energy, translated into feelings, thoughts, and emotions, causes all experience. There are no exceptions. Seth, The Nature of Personal Reality, Session 614. The ins and outs of reality creation. Before heading into downtown Portland, Oregon, I perused my to-do list. One of the items was to visit my favorite large department store and start a search for style ideas for some new furniture. I had other reasons to go to that particular store, but since I love studying furniture, that one item held my attention. By the time I crossed the city limits, I knew my to-do list far exceeded my time allotment. Reluctantly, I crossed off the furniture perusal since it hovered at the bottom of my priorities. So, in I go to the department store and enter the first available elevator. A couple follow me into it, and we push the buttons for our respective floors. Up we go, and sail right by not only the floor I selected, but also the one pushed by the couple. And at what floor do we finally stop and at which there is no one waiting to board the elevator, the furniture department. We create our own realities, so saith the wisdom of the sages. But the sages forgot to tell us exactly what that means. Sage Seth says that every event in which we participate, from the minute to the magnificent, was drawn into our lives because we chose to experience it. Okay, that's the big picture. But it certainly leaves room for questions when bounced off everyday events and when we're attempting to understand conscious creation. So for the rest of this chapter, we'll take a look at creation in general and our participation in it. Only a few stories will touch on conscious creation specifically. We'll cover that slice of creation later in the book. The implications of what you're about to read are incredible, at least when compared to mainstream thinking. If truly understood, they will lead you much closer to the 180-degree reorientation of thinking necessary in order to consciously create your desires with assurance and finesse. So, enjoy. Freedom Unlimited. I mentioned in the 180-degree turn that 5 people will view what they believe to be the same table, but actually 5 tables are projected into time and space. That's because each of us is in a different space continuum, and in our individual space continuums we create our personal realities. These continuums give the appearance of one reality created by all, but that's not the case. We share a perception of being in the same place, but technically we're not. The reason this becomes so important is because it gives us the flexibility and freedom to build our realities as we choose to experience them, without limits placed on our experiences from the exterior. It also gives us the confidence to know that the idea constructions we meet as events are our own, not things foisted upon us by happenstance. And by knowing we are responsible, we're free to determine the reasons behind their emergence and to change what doesn't suit us. There are basic assumptions that we all telepathically agree upon, and these don't change because we've chosen en masse to keep them in place. For example, where countries are located, who the present leaders are, and that there's a structure called the Empire State Building in a city called New York. That part of our shared mental web work or shared perception of reality doesn't alter, but much of the rest is up for grabs. For instance, if you want a husband and your beliefs and focus are in alignment with that wish, you'll get a husband. It is, after all, your reality. He may not be the one you handpicked, unless he agrees to participate in your reality as well as his. Nonetheless, someone, some consciousness, will step in to fill the role generated by the emanation of your electromagnetic energy units. If you live in poverty and want to experience prosperity, there is not a limitation in your way if you sincerely believe you can do it. You see, we're the ones who call the shots as to what happens to us because we create our own realities. The players who enter our lives agree to do so as we agree to enter theirs, for individual reasons. We can't control the players who decide to pass on our events, but we can control the overall scene. If we believe we're lovable, someone will love us. If we believe we're worthy of success, we'll find it someplace, sometime. If we believe our health cannot be impacted, we can stand in a room full of chickenpox and walk away unscathed. Some things can't be altered in physicality, such as the regrowth of a lost limb, but otherwise there is great flexibility in what we can create in our individual realities. Seth even goes so far as to say that when we are depressed and it seems the room is closing in on us, it is. It literally becomes smaller and darker if that's what our mood dictates. And the converse is true when we're riding high, full of excitement and happiness. The instruments used to measure such concrete dimensional changes would show nothing amiss, by the way, because they would become part of the room's reality and shrink or expand along with it. The flexibility of creation. While we're on the subject of alterations, consider this. You now know that every moment of experience is a fresh one, fueled from Framework 2 in the moment. All items surrounding us right now are brand new, no matter their supposed linear time life. So, what ages our car then? Technically, our inner self does in accordance with what we will accept, and that's based on the usual thoughts, emotions, focus, intent. So while our car will age because we believe in linear time, the amount and speed of decay is not altogether outside our sphere of influence. You've seen cars from the 1950s that are in perfect condition. Someone put a lot of thought and focus behind the automobile to make that happen, and in effect defied linear time. Sure, they painted it, washed it regularly, spent untold hours searching for and installing replacement parts, and lovingly spiffy it up on weekends. That's exactly what we're talking about. Focused thought and intent. They loved the car and put a lot of thinking into its condition. They get what they focus on, in this case, a beautiful vehicle delivered to them from a friendly universe moment by moment, based on the actions they take that express their desire. But it doesn't always take a lot of physical work. I know a woman who simply believes she won't have any serious automobile problems, that her vehicle will run for years with few repairs needed. She has her car serviced regularly and believes in the guy who does it. She also feels very secure in general, like not much can come into her life from left field that she'd rather not face. Not surprisingly, she's at ease with her car, and it does her the favor of making sure it doesn't upset that ease. In the case of the 1950s vehicle mentioned above, the owner set the car's condition through strong focus and intent. In this woman's case, she set the car's condition through strong assumption and belief. Here's another important point about personal creation. Let's say your car tires are aging. You don't have the time right now to get them replaced. Your wife warns you that you're living dangerously, that a flat tire could occur at any moment. Could it? Yes, sooner or later you'll be forced to deal with the reality of the aging tires. But how that reality impacts you is up to the way you structure it. Will you blow a tire on a 20-mile strip of nothing but highway? Or will you drive your car to the tire store over lunch one day and breeze out an hour later? Do we find the perfect antique chair, or do we create it in the store we're about to enter? Do we find the perfect blue sweater, or do we create it in the store we're about to enter? If each of us is in our own reality, then there is no reason why we can't create the chair or sweater upon desire. Those who sell the items to us would remember that they had been delivered to the stores in the usual ways, but then they are agreeing to the rules of our reality. So why not? Now, about aging tires. Why can't you simply replace them with a new set, fully installed on the car overnight by elves of the universe while you sleep? If you can walk into a store and find the perfect sweater and believe you created it, why not the tires? The question is, do you believe you could create the tires in such a way? That's probably a stretch, but finding a sweater that you like is completely acceptable within the parameters of what seems possible. So technically, you could create the tires with a wave of a magic wand of thought, but practically speaking, you would have to set aside a whole lot of beliefs in order to make it happen. Amazing flexibility we're dealing with in our personal realities, isn't it? That flexibility is also why some people miss a scheduled flight that later crashes, and why not everyone dies in a plague. It's why some folks experience space aliens and others see the Mother Mary as an interpretation of the same event. And it's why a medicine will work for certain people and why the same medication has no effect whatsoever on others. The illusion of security. As I mentioned previously, I don't lock my car. Stan holds a different set of beliefs and he feels more secure by taking that precaution. It used to irritate me when I'd leave my car unlocked only to discover in the morning that Stan had slipped out after dinner and secured it. But then one night, without being asked, the committee brought it up on the board in response to a heated discussion Stan and I had had the previous day on the subject. They, in essence, told me to drop it, let him be, forget it. They said no beliefs were right or wrong, they were just beliefs. My attitude suggested Stan was exhibiting a metaphysical shortcoming by not believing as strongly as I do in security. But my belief wasn't the better of the two, it was simply different. Okay, I said, then what are the implications of living with someone with a different belief system? For instance, Stan believes his car can be stolen if he doesn't lock it. I don't. Whose belief takes precedence in this situation? They said, if you consider the car under each other's control, so to speak, then it won't get stolen because you don't want to participate in that event. Also, Stan has a strong belief that if he locks the car it will be secure, and so it will. They went on to say that Stan's action of locking the car is simply a response to a belief. It doesn't protect the car from theft. Only his beliefs can work such wonders. The importance of knowing that our realities are created by our beliefs and no one else's is paramount to effective conscious creation. We don't have to worry any longer that someone, some circumstance, some act of fate can come keep us from our goal. If we shared a one reality fits all, then that would be the case. But thankfully, the universe was smart enough to build into the structure of our reality the means by which each of us can reach fulfillment, no matter the beliefs or actions of others. May the force be with you. Either we create our realities all the time, or we never do. There is no caveat found in the universal blueprint that says something, that sometimes we're the creators, but other times, well, we're at the mercy of nothing, ever. Not someone else's energy, their mind control, their actions. And God doesn't step in and protect us from harm. If we're protected, we've no one to thank but ourselves. Our thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs lead us into situations, and they can lead us right back out again. In the 1930s, my Aunt Mary lived in Atlanta. In those days, there was a corner near her home where people desiring a ride downtown would stand and wait for an offer for a ride. It was a neighborly thing to do, and the practice had been going on for years. Aunt Mary didn't give it a second thought when she entered the car of a stranger who asked her if she wanted a lift. This stranger wasn't playing by the same rules, however. He drove her to a remote vacant building and turned off the ignition. My aunt told me a cool force overcame her and she knew she was going to be fine. She looked him in the eye and told him she trusted him and knew he wouldn't hurt her. Now, she said, take me to my destination in Atlanta, like you agreed to do. He hadn't uttered a word since his first salutation on the neighborhood corner, and he still didn't, but he did start the car. When they arrived in Atlanta, he leaned across her, opened the door, and silently saluted her. She stepped out and her knees buckled. Aunt Mary invited the guy into her reality, and he agreed to participate. She then invited him to leave, and he agreed. Could she have been raped outside the darkened building? The answer to that question can only be found in her belief system of the time. I suspect, though, that because she experienced a cool force, the point of the exercise wasn't to be hurt. Maybe it was to convince herself there really is more to reality than conventional thinking suggests.